my job, ending a long relationship, and convincing myself that a cheaper place across town was not a step backward but a fresh start. Sienna was moving into the room across from mine because the landlord had decided we would make perfect roommates, which was landlord language for two people desperate enough to split rent with a stranger. She smiled like she had practiced it in the mirror, warm but guarded, and offered me the basil plant as a peace offering because she said every home needed something alive in it. At the time, I laughed, but the truth was, I needed that plant more than I wanted to admit. Our apartment was small, bright, and full of strange daytime noises. Delivery trucks groaned outside the windows, children from the daycare downstairs laughed in sharp little bursts, and sunlight poured through the kitchen blinds every afternoon like gold dust. Sienna worked at a children's library, and I freelanced from home, taking whatever writing and editing jobs I could find to keep myself from drowning in bills. She left every morning in soft-colored sweaters with her hair tied loosely at the back of her neck, carrying a canvas bag full of picture books and stickers. I stayed behind in sweatpants, pretending my life was under control. We were polite at first, then familiar, then something almost like family. She labeled leftovers for both of us, left encouraging notes near the coffee maker, and always asked how my day was even when I had done nothing but stare at job listings and feel useless. But Sienna had sadness in her that did not match her kindness. Some afternoons, I would catch her sitting by the window with her phone in her hand, staring at a number she never called. Other times, she would return from work with red eyes and say allergies were terrible this season, even in the middle of winter. She never brought friends over. She never talked about her parents. On her birthday, she made cupcakes for the kids at the library but refused to let me buy her a cake. When I asked why, she said birthdays were easier when you did not expect anyone to remember them. I did not push. I had my own locked rooms inside me, and I understood that some people survived by keeping certain doors closed. A year passed like that. Then another. Slowly, my life began to heal around the edges. I found steadier work, laughed more, cooked again, and stopped feeling like every morning was something to survive. Sienna was there through all of it, never dramatic, never demanding, just present in the quiet ways that matter most. When my laptop crashed before a deadline, she sat beside me at the kitchen table and helped me recreate notes from memory. When I got rejected from a job I had prayed for, she brought home mango pastries and said closed doors sometimes protected us from rooms that were too small for our souls. When I caught the flu, she checked my temperature before leaving for work and left soup in a thermos by my bed. She made caring look simple, but I sensed it cost her more than she showed. Then, on a bright Thursday morning in May, I found cardboard boxes stacked against the living room wall. Sunlight fell across them in neat rectangles. Sienna stood in the kitchen washing a mug that was already clean. Her shoulders were tense, and her suitcase sat open near the couch. She told me she was moving out by the end of the week. The words hit me harder than I expected. I asked if something had happened, if rent was too much, if she needed money, if I had done something wrong. She shook her head and smiled that practiced smile from the hallway years ago. She said she had been offered a position at a community library in another city, a better job, a new beginning. But her voice cracked when she said new beginning, and I knew she was leaving something behind that she did not know how to carry anymore. For 2 days, the apartment filled with the soft grief of packing. Books disappeared from shelves. Her yellow mug vanished from the drying rack. The basil plant, somehow still alive after all those years, sat on the windowsill between us like a witness. I tried to be supportive, but every box felt like a small goodbye. On her final morning, the sun was high and warm, bright enough to make the floorboards shine. I was folding towels when she knocked on my door, even though it was open. She stood there holding a white envelope and wearing the blue cardigan she always wore when she was nervous. Her eyes were swollen, and her fingers trembled. She asked for one last favor. She said she needed me to deliver the envelope to someone named Maribel Rowe, a woman who ran a small flower shop called Morning Harbor Blooms across town. I asked why she could not mail it or take it herself. Sienna looked down and said because if she saw Maribel's face, she might lose the courage to leave. Something inside me tightened. The envelope had no stamp, only the name written in careful handwriting. I asked who Maribel was. Sienna said she was the woman who should have been her mother. Then she pressed the envelope into my hand and whispered that I was the only person she trusted not to throw it away. After she left, the apartment felt impossibly loud. The refrigerator hummed. A car horn sounded outside. Somewhere below, children shouted during recess. Her room was empty except for a faded ribbon on the floor and the faint smell of lavender soap. I sat at the kitchen table staring at the envelope, fighting the urge to open it. I did not. Whatever secret lived inside belonged to Sienna. But by noon, guilt pushed me out the door. I took the bus across town, holding the envelope in my lap like it was fragile glass. Morning harbor blooms sat on a corner beneath a striped green awning, surrounded by buckets of sunflowers, lilies, and pale pink roses. The shop looked like the kind of place where broken people might accidentally remember beauty. Maribel Rowe was arranging white tulips near the counter when I walked in. She was in her late 50s, with silver-streaked hair, kind eyes, and hands that moved gently around flowers as if they were sleeping children. I said her name, and she looked up. The moment she saw the envelope, her face changed. She did not ask who I was at first. She just touched the handwriting with 2 fingers and whispered Sienna's name. There was so much love and pain in that whisper that I had to look away. She invited me to sit in a small back room where sunlight spilled across a wooden table covered in petals. Then she opened the letter. As Maribel read, tears slid silently down her face. I sat across from her, feeling like an intruder in a grief too old to have edges. Finally, she handed me the letter with permission to read it. Sienna had written that she knew the truth. She knew Maribel had tried to adopt her when she was 4, after Sienna's mother died and her father disappeared. She knew the system had separated them, that paperwork had been lost, that relatives who did not want her had taken her only for money, and that Maribel had searched for years until someone told her Sienna had been moved out of state. Sienna wrote that she had found Maribel 2 years ago but was too afraid to knock on the flower shop door. She had stood outside many times, watching Maribel water plants in the morning, wondering if love could survive that much time. She wrote that she was leaving because being so close to what she had lost hurt too much. She thanked Maribel for loving a child no one else fought for, even if that child never came home. By the time I finished, my hands were shaking. Maribel covered her mouth and sobbed with the terrible quietness of someone who had waited too long to break. She told me Sienna's mother had been her best friend. When Sienna was born, Maribel was there. When Sienna took her first steps, Maribel caught her. After the accident that killed Sienna's mother, Maribel promised she would raise the little girl as her own. But grief, bureaucracy, distance, and cruel relatives had swallowed Sienna whole. Maribel had never stopped looking. She had kept a room ready for years. She had celebrated Sienna's birthday every spring with a single cupcake and a candle in the shop window. My chest ached as I realized Sienna had spent 2 years walking past a door that had always been open for her. I called Sienna immediately, but her phone went to voicemail. Maribel called too. Nothing. We found out from the bus station that Sienna had bought a ticket leaving at 3 in the afternoon. It was already 2:15. Maribel moved faster than I expected, grabbing her keys with shaking hands. I went with her because the favor had become something larger than delivery. It had become a race against a lifetime of loneliness. Outside, the day was bright and almost cruelly beautiful. Traffic crawled. Every red light felt like a locked gate. Maribel kept one hand on the steering wheel and the other pressed against her heart. She kept saying she should have known, she should have felt Sienna nearby, she should have looked harder. I told her Sienna was scared, not gone. I said it even though I was afraid we would be too late. We reached the station with 15 minutes to spare. The place was crowded with sunlight, rolling suitcases, announcements, and people rushing toward departures. Maribel searched every bench with desperate eyes. Then I saw the blue cardigan near gate 6. Sienna was standing alone beside her suitcase, looking smaller than I had ever seen her. She was staring at her phone, probably listening to our missed calls, tears falling freely now that she thought no one was watching. Maribel stopped walking. For a second, neither of them moved. Years of grief stood between them like a wall. Then Maribel said Sienna's name. Sienna turned. Her face collapsed. Not in fear, not exactly, but in the way people break when the thing they wanted most finally arrives and they do not know whether they are allowed to touch it. Maribel crossed the space first and wrapped her arms around her. Sienna resisted for one heartbeat, then folded into her like a child coming home from a storm. They held each other in the middle of the bus station while strangers walked around them, while the afternoon sun poured through the glass ceiling, while an announcement called for boarding that no longer mattered. I stood a few feet away with tears in my eyes, understanding that some miracles do not arrive with thunder. Sometimes they arrive as a woman with flowers on her sleeves and a roommate brave enough to ask for one last favor. Sienna did not leave that day. She came back to the apartment with Maribel and me, but everything felt different. The boxes were still there, yet they no longer looked like an ending. They looked like proof that life can change direction even after the ticket is bought. Maribel brought lunch from a small bakery, and we sat in the living room with the windows open, eating sandwiches and crying between stories. Sienna learned about her mother's laugh, her love of yellow dresses, the lullaby she used to hum in the kitchen. Maribel learned about the home Sienna had survived, the teachers who ignored her, the nights she promised herself she would never need anyone again. I listened quietly, realizing that I had mistaken Sienna's kindness for softness when really it was courage. She had given warmth to others while freezing inside. In the weeks that followed, Sienna postponed the new job and began spending mornings at the flower shop. Maribel taught her how to trim stems, wrap bouquets, and remember joy without apologizing for it. I visited often, usually under the excuse of buying flowers I could not afford. The shop became a strange little family headquarters. Sienna still had hard days. Healing did not turn her pain into poetry overnight. Some mornings, she cried in the storage room because being loved felt unfamiliar. Some afternoons, Maribel cried over old photographs because regret does not vanish just because reunion arrives. But slowly, they built something real. Not the childhood they had lost, but a future honest enough to hold both grief and gratitude. And me? I thought I was only the messenger. I thought the story belonged to them. But one afternoon, as I watched Sienna laughing behind the counter with a streak of pollen on her cheek, I realized my life had changed too. For years, I had believed family was something you either had or did not have. I had kept people at a safe distance, terrified they would leave once they saw how much I needed them. But Sienna's last favor taught me that love often waits behind doors we are too afraid to knock on. It taught me that being trusted with someone's pain is not a burden, it is an honor. It taught me that sometimes, saving someone else from leaving helps you come back to yourself. A month later, Sienna officially moved out, but not to another city. She moved into the small apartment above Morning Harbor Blooms, the room Maribel had kept ready in her heart long before she could keep it ready in real life. On moving day, the sun was bright, and the street smelled of rain-washed pavement and fresh roses. I carried the basil plant down the stairs, and Sienna laughed through tears when I handed it to her. She said every home needed something alive in it. I told her some homes needed someone brave enough to return. Maribel placed a yellow ribbon around the pot, the same shade Sienna's mother used to love, and for a moment, it felt like even the past had leaned close to bless them. If this story touched your heart, please like, comment, share, and subscribe, because stories like this remind us that kindness can become a bridge, forgiveness can become a home, and second chances can arrive when someone chooses not to look away. Special request: Comment one last favor if you believe one small act of kindness can change someone's entire life. Years have passed since that morning, but I still think about the envelope. It was thin, almost weightless, yet it carried years of sorrow, hope, fear, and love. Sienna now runs the children's reading corner inside Maribel's flower shop every Saturday afternoon, surrounded by little kids, bright books, and buckets of sunflowers. Maribel still lights one candle every year on Sienna's birthday, but now Sienna is there to blow it out. And whenever someone asks how we all became family, Sienna smiles at me from across the room and says it started with one last favor before moving out. But I know the truth. It started with a lonely girl who still believed love might be waiting somewhere, a woman who never stopped searching, and a roommate who finally learned that sometimes the smallest yes can open the door to the rest of your life.